Hey everyone, Chad with Stellarbot, and this is guitar module 1.2. In this video, I'm going to talk about scales, a couple scales, the major scale and the minor scale, what a scale is and why it's useful. So the first things first is most people have probably heard a scale and not even know what it is, and if you've ever seen The Sound of Music, which is kind of an old video, the major scale is the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So if I wanted to do that on guitar, I could do that using a prescribed formula of half steps and whole steps. Now, a half step is the smallest step that we will make in Western music. In Eastern music, they will even chop those further and do quarter steps, which is why when if you listen to like Indian music and you hear them sing, it sounds like they're just doing kind of like warbly stuff, like but they're actually hitting specific notes in there. But for us, the smallest steps that we do are half steps. On piano, that would be like going every key up, like white key, black key, white key, black key. On guitar, that would be like going every fret like this. So those are half steps. So if I wanted to do a full step or a whole step, that would be 2 frets like this. So open note to 2nd fret to 4th fret. So if I wanted to do do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do on guitar, the steps that I'm going to use are going to be whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Or if I did that in frets, that would be 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. And I could do that on any string. So I will just pick the high E string for now, and I'll go do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So if you're doing it correctly, it should sound like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So again, I'll do it in whole steps and half steps. So I don't say my first step on the first note, because remember, think of like a staircase. If you're on the floor, your first step is not until you get to that next level. So there's my basement level, and then I would go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Or if I did it in frets, it would be open string, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. And you might be asking, why is this even important? Well, music is built on scales, and so what we'll do is those scales are going to be our determining notes that we end up building our chords on. So for example, if I built chords on that scale that I just did, it would sound like this. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So that was building chords on each one of those notes. So that's why scales are going to be super important. So let's try another one. Let's pick, say, the B string, and we'll go play your first note and then do the steps. So whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So that is your B major scale. We use major and minor to denote 2 very different sounding scales or sounding songs. So you could have a song that's in a major key, and you could have a song that's in a minor key. And when I say key, what I'm referring to is kind of the family or the grouping of chords that we group together based on the notes in that scale that we use to create music and songs. So that is the major scale. That is what we call the happier sounding scale. I can also have major chords, so that would be like an E major chord. Now contrast that with the minor chord. Sounds quite a bit darker, quite a bit sadder, and so that is the minor chord. So like we can have major scales and major chords, we can also have minor chords and minor scales. So if I wanted to do a minor scale, Now my formula of half steps and whole steps, or my sequence, is going to change up a little bit, and this time around it's going to sound like this. Now there's a couple different types of minor scales, but for now we are going to stick with the minor scale that shares the same sharps and flats as its respective major scale, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit. But we can also have what we call the harmonic minor scale. Has that kind of Arabian, Aladdin feel to it. We're not going to get into that just yet, but we will later on. So for now, we're going to use what we just call the natural minor scale. And the formula for that scale is play your first note, and then you're gonna go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. So it has a kind of darker, sadder quality to it. So that is the E minor scale, or the E natural minor scale. So those are important to know because your ear is going to kind of tell you, oh, that's kind of a happy sounding chord, or it's kind of a sad, dark sounding chord, and you should know that those are major and minor chords respectively. Okay, so now that we have done the steps to build those scales, let's talk about how you would actually name a scale. So remember, in the last video we've talked about how the musical alphabet starts at A and goes to G, and then there's no H or anything beyond that. You just have those first 7 letters. And then we have also established our fixed pitches for guitar in what we call standard tuning, which is E, A, D, G, B, E, or Evan always does good before eating. Hope you remember that. And so what we can do is we can use our fixed pitches, or what we don't know, to help us find the rest of the notes. Now, here are the rules for naming scales. You have to use every alphabetical letter, and then you also have to follow that formula of whole steps and half steps. So we're gonna do that using the major scale, not the minor scale for now, but the major scale. And so we will start with E, and I'll use the high E string. And so if I wanted to build or name the notes in that scale, remember the first thing I have to do is follow the whole steps and half steps. And remember the major scale is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And so if I know that this note is E, as in Evan always does good before eating, that means the note on the next fret is going to be F, because on the piano there's no black key in between E and F, which means that my first step is actually going to land me at F sharp, because I do have to use that letter F in my scale, and that's why we're going to call it F sharp instead of G flat. So E, F sharp. Now remember, my next step is going to be a whole step again, and so a whole step, or rather my next fret would be G, which means that this note here is going to be G sharp. And then my next step is a half step, and G sharp would put me to A after that. And then my next one's a whole step, so that would be A sharp, B. And then remember, there's no black key between B and C either, so this is the note C, which means that I have to do a whole step, which is going to put me at C sharp. And then my next one is another whole step, and C sharp, whole step, this would be D, so this would be D sharp. And then my last step is a half step, which puts me back at E, which is the same note as where I started. So to recap that is E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E again. So what we can say about the E major scale is that it has 4 sharps in it. Which, if you're playing piano, that's going to be quite a few black keys. But on guitar, that's doesn't really make a difference for us, but it is useful to know, because those notes are going to be the notes that you would solo on if you were playing electric guitar. Those are going to be the roots of with chords that we build on that scale. So knowing how to name those scales are very important. Now here's another thing about scales. If you have sharps in a scale, in a major scale, you're not going to have flats. So let's do an example of a scale where we would end up with a flat in it. So let's take F, for example. So we know that our open string is E, and so if I play the note on the first fret, that's going to be F. So if I built my scale starting from F, and we used F as our root, then I'm going to go whole step, which puts me at G, whole step, which puts me at A, because I have black keys in between those, F sharp and G sharp. So F, G, A. Now my next step is a half step, which is going to put me right here. So I could call that A sharp, but the rule about scale building is that you have to use every alphabetical letter. So since I've already used A, then I have to call this note B, but because it's a half step, we're going to call it B flat. So that is why some scales will have sharps and other scales will have flats in them. So F is an example of a scale that has a flat in it. Let's finish it up. A, B flat. Now I'm going another whole step, which this would be B, so this would be C. And then whole step to D, whole step to E, and then my last one's a half step, which is going to land me back at F, which is where we started. So if F is the root of our scale, then the whole F scale goes F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, and F. So most of the time, if you have a song that has sharps in it, you're not going to have flats in it, and vice versa. If you have a song that has a lot of flats in it or in the chords, typically you shouldn't see sharps in it as well. Now there are always exceptions to that, and if you're playing jazz music breaks all the rules. But if it's just stuff that's like on the radio or stuff that you're doing in your church, most of that stuff stays pretty true to the scale, and so you're going to have either sharps or either flats. So that is how you name scales, and as an exercise, what you can do is you can just pick any spot on your guitar, pick any string, and practice building scales and naming them, and that will actually help you discover which scales are going to have flats and which ones are going to have sharps and how many of them, and so that would be a really good exercise. I'll do one more. So if I just picked, say, the G string, and I went, say I wanted to start on the second fret, which would be A. So if I wanted to do the A major scale, starting from here, using A as my root, I would go A, whole step to B, whole step to C sharp, remember, because there's no black key between B and C, so I gotta go B, C sharp, half step to D, whole step to E, whole step to F sharp, because my next note would be F, there's no black key in between those, whole step to G sharp, and then half step to A. So my A major scale would be A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And so you can practice doing those up the neck and down the neck on any string. Kind of practice, and this will also help you to kind of get to know the fretboard and the guitar neck a little bit better, and that's going to be very useful stuff. Alright, so hopefully that gives you an understanding of what scales are and why they're useful, because they're very foundational concepts that we're going to build on later with chords and soloing and a lot of really good stuff that's going to help you guys become super awesome Stellarbot musicians. So thanks for watching this video. In the next video, we are going to talk about intervals, which is the distance from one note to another, and kind of how to listen for them by ear and identify them. So that's going to be useful as well. See you in the next video.